When a new law is implemented to turn the Avengers from an independent organization to one that is under the control of the United Nations, this causes friction between the Avengers. Things get even more complicated when Bucky Barnes, aka the Winter Soldier, becomes a wanted man after being framed for something he didn't do, causing Captain America and several other heroes to go rogue in order to help clear Barnes' name. Written by Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely and directed by Joe and Anthony Russo, who were brought back following the positive reception of the previous Captain America movie, The Winter Soldier, Captain America Civil War is a film that borrows elements from the 2006 7-issue comic book storyline Civil War, while also acting as a sequel to Avengers Age of Ultron that focuses on the aftermath of that film, while also focusing on character and story elements from the previous Captain America movies in order to conclude the trilogy. After its April 12th premiere followed by its release on May the 6th, the film received critical and commercial success, grossing over $1.1 billion worldwide, becoming the highest grossing movie of 2016 and the 12th highest grossing movie of all time, receiving praise for its screenplay, performances, themes, and action. Everyone who is a fan of superhero movies or comic book movies in general has their absolute favorite. For example, it may be one that you watch again and again, one that you watch once or twice a year religiously, or one that you simply look at and think, yep, that was pretty freaking amazing! Well, for me, that is a tough question to answer, because to tell you the truth, I can never make up my mind. There are some superhero movies that I love so much that anytime I watch them, I'll be like, oh my god, that is my favorite! Despite me thinking the exact same thing about the previous one that I watched, and the one before that, 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 and the one before that. Well, that's because I love pretty much all of those movies equally, so much so that my absolute favorite of the bunch literally depends on how recently I watched them. And right now, my favorite is Captain America Civil War. My god, I love this movie. For a superhero movie, it's pretty small scale. Yes, it is a Captain America movie that also features almost every other Avenger, as well as introducing 2 new characters into the mix, but it's also a self-contained story in a fracking huge universe at this point. But because of the way this small-scale self-contained story is told, it allows it to benefit from the fact that it takes place in a bigger universe, and it's because of the story and the way that it's told that this one is my favorite. Let's begin with the title character, Captain America. Steve Rogers, aka Captain America, is a very weird and unique protagonist. Why? Because he doesn't change. Usually the protagonist has to learn to be more of this or that, whether it's learning to take responsibility for great power, becoming a better leader by righting the wrongs of the past, and through learning whatever that something is, they grow more as a character. Captain America doesn't ever do that, and believe it or not, that isn't a bad thing. Cap never changing is arguably what makes him such a compelling protagonist. You see, the conflict in his story more often than not stems from the fact that the world around him is changing, which makes this movie really interesting because Cap is fighting back against something that is changing the world around him because he doesn't think it's right or just. He fights for what's right, which is arguably why more often than not he wins. He wins because he knows what's right, thus refusing to change. Captain America is just a good guy, and it's the fact that he's such a good person that makes him a superhero. Cap is also shown to be someone who believes in people rather than the systems or organizations he's a part of, which is demonstrated when he goes rogue to clear Bucky's name. He believes that Bucky isn't capable of blowing up a building full of world leaders and government officials, so he fights back against the system, which was already a moral compromise for Steve, but he even goes against the Avengers to do this. The fact that he is willing to not only fight against the system, but also an organization that he helped start and has also been a part of for some time now, just to help his friend, shows he's willing to do whatever it takes to do what's right. He fights against the system and the Avengers because they're no longer going with his moral code. They've actually shifted against it. It's a depressing idea when you really think about it, because by sticking to his moral code, he loses his friends and any sense of belonging. In the first Avenger, he goes rogue in the army to save people that the army were going to leave behind. In the Winter Soldier, he destroys S.H.I.E.L.D. after discovering that it was compromised by Hydra. And in Civil War, he goes against the world that he fought to protect and the Avengers, people who he views as family, and ends up breaking them apart. This not only shows the lengths he's willing to go to do the right thing, but it also shows that he doesn't trust the system. Hell, if he's learned anything from his time in the MCU, it's that he can't trust the system, which again can be seen in the first Avenger when the army won't send a rescue team to save soldiers that are being kept prisoner by Hydra, S.H.I.E.L.D. being compromised and effectively being controlled by Hydra, and now a document that goes against his moral code and puts his friend in danger. Obviously, this is in direct contrast to Tony Stark. He thinks this new legislation is a really good idea. But I'll get more into the political stuff later. Let's actually take a look at his motive for agreeing with it. Tony Stark is basically trying to redeem himself throughout the entire movie because he feels guilty, which starts when a grieving mother tells him that her son died in Sokovia during the events of Avengers Age of Ultron, and that she blames Tony Stark for his death. It's a small but pivotal scene that not only sets up Tony's motive and the side he takes in this conflict, but it also sets up his entire arc. He feels guilty that he couldn't save this one person, which can be seen by the fact that he specifically references Charlie Spencer, the woman's son, when arguing for the Accords. Decisions like going along with the Accords and even confining Wanda to the compound for protection seem like selfless decisions. However, because he's doing this to redeem himself and in his eyes become a better person, it brings an element of underlying selfishness to his decision making stemmed from the guilt of not being able to save everyone. He's not acting based off the good of his heart as much as he wants to think that. He's doing this because of a guilty conscience. He's so guilty that he signs away his freedom to help others as a way of shifting the blame away from himself, basically absolving himself from the consequences of his actions, which is flat out selfish. This once again creates a contrast with Cap's ideology. Cap knows that he can't save everyone. He says we try to save as many people as we can, sometimes that doesn't mean everybody. He accepts that he can't save everyone and chooses to save as many people as he can, and he even accepts the consequences of his actions. Cap admits that it was his fault for not seeing the bomb vest on Rumlow in the beginning of the movie, showing that Cap accepts the blame and consequences for his actions rather than trying to shift them away from himself. Captain America's motivations for his decisions are noble and selfless, whereas Tony's motives are reactive and emotional because of his guilt and selfishness. It's a reactive mindset. He doesn't make decisions with a level head. He makes these decisions and has these motivations because he's in pain. His pain is actually visualized by the increasing amount of injuries that he receives throughout the film, starting with a head injury, followed by a numb left arm, then he suffers multiple contusions in the airport battle, and finally by the end of the film, after losing to Cap, he's covered in his own blood, symbolizing his pain caused by his guilt and the bad decisions that he makes because he's in pain. The contrast between Cap and Tony can also clearly be seen in the fact that Cap is often shot from the left, symbolizing his nobleness and his selflessness, whereas Tony is often shot from the right, representing his guilt, pain, and selfishness. One scene that I think perfectly captures Tony's character in this movie is his recruitment of Spider-Man. This is a really entertaining scene due to the way Robert Downey Jr. and Tom Holland play off each other. The comedy in this scene is hilarious, and all in all, it makes for a really well done and fun introduction to the MCU's interpretation of Spider-Man. However, there is so much going on from a character perspective. You see, Peter Parker says that when the bad things happen, they happen because of you, showing that philosophically, he is way more on Captain America's side than he is on Iron Man's. Tony sees this and then realizes that he has to trick Peter into fighting for his side, even though they clearly have completely different philosophies. I mean, you can even see on his face when he looks down at his feet for a moment, symbolizing that he feels guilty, a small moment of self-awareness. He knows what he's about to do, but he ignores his guilt and arguably manipulates Peter into fighting for his side. This can later be seen in the way that Spider-Man is not only trying to impress Iron Man throughout the entire airport battle, but also in his confrontation with Captain America, where he repeats what Tony has told him about Cap, like the idea that Cap is wrong, he thinks he's right, and that makes him dangerous, or just simply saying that Mr. Stark said Cap would say that, after Cap says that there's a lot going on that he doesn't understand, which ironically, when you think about it, is true. What makes this conflict even better is that it's not contrived in the slightest. Iron Man has been on a long 5-movie journey in which he learns that he needs to be more responsible. In every movie he learns something, and because of that he changes, whereas Captain America doesn't change. If his arc across the movies up until this point has taught him anything, it's to distrust the system. The natural progression of these two ideologies leads to conflicts between them. They've been setting this up the whole time. Captain America's refusal to change is a massive contrast to Tony Stark, who is always trying to be a better person and learning lessons in all of his films. It creates a truly enthralling dynamic. This writing is real, committed, and more importantly, it's true to these characters. You actually believe that they would be in conflict with each other because of this, and it's not some contrived plot point or reason that's being created solely for the purpose of this movie. It's surprisingly nuanced, and that is partly because this conflict was being set up in the previous films. So when it actually happens in this film, it feels like a natural progression. The theme of selflessness versus selfishness is actually reflected in the teams themselves as well as Captain America and Iron Man. Everyone on Team Cap is there because they're trying to help someone. Cap is trying to help Bucky, Falcon is trying to help Cap, help Bucky, Wanda wants to help Cap, Hawkeye wants to help Wanda and Cap, and Ant-Man just wants to help everyone. This shows that this team has come together for selfless reasons, and their collective selflessness is emphasized even further when the entire team agrees to hold off Team Iron Man during the airport battle in order for Cap and Bucky to get to Siberia on the Quinjet, resulting in all of them, except for Cap and Bucky obviously, getting caught. It really adds a sense of endearment to this team that I just can't help but get invested in. On the other hand, you have Team Iron Man. Iron Man is just doing this as a form of redemption to relieve himself of the blame, Spider-Man is trying to impress Iron Man, War Machine doesn't want to become a criminal, and Black Panther is just there for Bucky. The only two members on this team that don't have selfish intentions are Black Widow and Vision. Vision is trying to help Wanda because he thinks she's going down the wrong path, and Black Widow wants to help Cap because she thinks he's making a mistake. However, this is why I think Black Widow is one of the most interesting parts of this movie, because she definitely agrees with Iron Man, which is why I think she teams up with him initially, but she lets Cap and Bucky go at the end of the airport battle because she also agrees with Cap, and like Cap, she believes that doing the right thing is more important, so she kind of agrees with both sides of the argument, which I find really interesting. Sure, not everyone on this team has selfish intentions, but most of them do, which is enough to create a cool contrast between the two teams that goes beyond who's on which team. What also makes this a really intriguing moral dilemma is that you understand where everyone is coming from. Every character in this movie has a clear motivation for being on screen, whether they're a hero or a villain. So when the characters start kicking each other's asses, it freaking rocks, because you care about why they're there and why they're doing what they're doing. And that is amazing writing. So the political stuff. The United Nations are basically sick of the Avengers. They think that there's been too much loss of life and destruction because of their mistakes, so legislation is passed to make the Avengers an organization that operates under the United Nations. So that essentially means that the Avengers are working for the government. It also means that unless registered in the Accords, it is now illegal to be a superhero. This creates a divide between the Avengers, and as a result, we're treated to some really interesting political debates between the Avengers. Obviously, we've got Captain America, who doesn't agree with these Accords because it's run by people with agendas, and those agendas can change, which is a really valid point. Humanity does have a history of electing really shady people. That and bureaucratic decision making takes a freaking long time. What if the Avengers need to go somewhere but the UN doesn't let them, or they take too long to make a decision? Tony Stark also makes some pretty good points. He thinks it's a good idea because they're taking orders from the people who govern the people they're trying to protect, but also because members of the team are on the same power level as a nuclear bomb. So having the Avengers being dictated by a United Nations panel can prevent further destruction and loss of life, which are also valid points. Everyone makes really good, valid political points, which is why it's so interesting seeing these superheroes debate about politics, aside from the fact that it's superheroes debating about politics. And the fact that they don't agree with each other and take sides is not only really realistic, but it adds to the investment. There's a great shot in which Cap is framed in between War Machine and Falcon as they debate both sides of the issue. It's like a cool devil and angel act in a sense, because it shows Cap is deliberating. He's considering how this document will affect everything from the Avengers, the world, and arguably if he even agrees with it or not, which is represented by the fact that on one side of the frame you've got Falcon who doesn't agree with it, and on the other you've got Rhodey who does agree with it. It's great to see these larger than life superheroes debate and argue with each other about political issues, but it's also really interesting seeing them think about it and consider what this truly means for them and the world around them. That's why this movie is so surprising in terms of how serious it is. It really takes its time to set up its conflicts and presents them in a world where there are dire consequences, not just for mistakes that the characters have made in the past, but also their actions. It takes events from the previous films, such as the Battle of Sokovia in Age of Ultron, the final battle in The Winter Soldier, and even the Battle of New York in the first Avengers movie, and it shows the political consequences of those events, as well as the intimate and human consequences of those actions, which at the time was both really surprising and pleasing to see, especially considering how maturely it explores it. One of my favorite parts of this movie is Black Panther. He is a freaking badass in this movie. The filmmakers took what time they had with him and gave you a reason to care about him, understand what he's doing, and understand why he's doing it. His father is killed in an explosion, he's led to believe it was Bucky Barnes, and he goes on a quest for vengeance. His arc is one of my favorites because you have this character who is driven by his desire for vengeance. Everything he does, every decision he makes is so he can get to Bucky and get his revenge. And that was really entertaining to see play out. His thirst for vengeance makes him a direct parallel to the film's villain Zemo, who is also on a quest for vengeance, but at the same time he's also a direct contrast. During Cap and Iron Man's final battle, T'Challa, after finding out that Bucky was framed for bombing the UN and killing T'Challa's father, confronts Zemo and realizes that vengeance has completely consumed Zemo. And because of this, Zemo's thirst for vengeance has caused loss of life, but also the downfall of the Avengers. In this moment, Black Panther realizes the destructive power of vengeance and how it can blind people to the truth. Zemo saw the Avengers as the villains because his family were indirectly killed during their battle against Ultron, making them, in his eyes, responsible for their deaths. It also blinded him to the consequences of his quest for vengeance. Black Panther choosing not to kill Zemo in this moment, despite him knowing that Zemo is the one who is responsible for killing his father, and preventing Zemo from killing himself, is symbolic of Black Panther letting go of his desire for vengeance. And the fact that he removes his mask before the conversation is symbolic of vengeance no longer blinding him to the truth. And talking to Zemo, I know a lot of people don't like this character, but I gotta admit, I absolutely love him as a villain. He's not a superpowered dude, a dude with a superpowered suit, a superpowered dude with a superpowered suit, a dude with plans of world domination, or even a genocidal maniac from space. He's just a guy driven by vengeance. He knows he's nowhere near powerful enough to kill the Avengers, so he tears them apart. He makes them rip each other apart, and what's even crazier, he technically succeeds. The Avengers end up splitting up, fighting each other, and in a couple of cases nearly killing each other. The movie ends with the Avengers being broken apart and half of them being wanted criminals. His plan worked. He not only beat the Avengers, but he broke them apart. And again, he's just a guy. That's a pretty unique villain, and all these things are consequences of vengeance and the destructive power it can have, as well as how it affects people. Not just the people that are caught in harm's way, but also how it blinds people to the truth or reality of a situation. And I think both Zemo and Black Panther are excellent portrayals of the negative impacts of vengeance. Let's talk about Spider-Man. I am of the opinion that this is the best incarnation of the webhead we've ever had. In literally 8 minutes of screen time, the writers gave us everything that makes Peter Parker so likable, lovable, and entertaining. He's a poor kid in this movie, a dumpster diver that could barely afford anything. He's got a computer from the late 80s, and when Tony Stark finds him and we see what his suit looks like, his suit, it's my days, it's shit! But that's great, and arguably more realistic. If he's a poor kid, then how's he gonna afford to make a good quality high-tech suit? They nailed Spider-Man. He is amazing in this movie, and I love every minute this movie spends with him. The action sequences in Civil War are amazing. There's a lot of hand-to-hand combat sequences and a lot of running chase scenes, and yes, there is a lot of huge explosions and CGI, but a lot of the action feels very in-camera, which is why I am so glad that the Russo brothers came back to direct this movie, because they took what they did with the action in The Winter Soldier and improved upon it in this film, and it's arguably more well handled. I still love The Winter Soldier. The one thing I don't think anyone can say anything bad about is the stunt team. They do some incredible work in this film. There are a lot of incredible stunts in this movie, which is thankfully all in camera, and it looks very realistic, which is very impressive. Hands down, my favorite action scene of this movie is the airport battle sequence. This thing is one of the most spectacular action sequences I have ever seen. When people ask me what my favorite action sequence from any Marvel movie is, this is often one of the first sequences that pops into my mind. Seeing these larger-than-life superheroes fighting each other is a fantastical dream come true, but the movie also treats it as a tragedy of sorts. The music in this scene is big and loud, and it doesn't shy away from that in the big epic moments, but when the two opposing sides charge at each other and engage in combat, the music isn't big and loud to convey the sense of, yeah, this is freaking awesome! Although, let's be honest, it is exactly that. The music actually sounds kind of sad and tragic, like this is something that shouldn't be happening, and that it's a tragedy that these heroes, most of which have been working together for a few years now, are now against each other. And while there is a tragic element to this sequence, it's impossible to deny how much fun this sequence actually is. The characters play off each other, marvelously, to both great dramatic effect and comedic effect. There's the passive-aggressive interplay between the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which always gets a chuckle out of me, and Hawkeye's failed attempt to introduce himself to Black Panther Panther is hilarious. There's also the tension throughout the scene as characters who were close friends like Hawkeye and Black Widow fight each other without trying to hurt one another. One of the most interesting moments in the airport battle for me was Cap's fight with Spider-Man, not just because of the exchange they have, which is really charming, and also the action in this scene. I mean, freaking hell. Spider-Man fighting Captain America. This whole moment in the airport battle is amazing. I mean, the scenes Spider-Man counteract Cap's attacks and seeing Cap counteract Spider-Man's attacks and just seeing them play off each other and fight each other. It's awesome. This movie is awesome. Anyway, back to what I was actually trying to say. You have two characters who are on the same page philosophically going against each other, and that's even represented by the colors because both heroes have red and blue color schemes. However, the fact that Spider-Man's mask is covering his entire face is symbolic of the fact that Spider-Man is blind to the similarities he shares with Cap on a philosophical level, due to Tony Stark swaying him over to his side, which is represented by the fact that his suit was literally made by Tony Stark. This entire sequence is just so imaginative and fantastical. This was sort of a taste of what Infinity War and Endgame could be, because you have these superheroes, all of which have different abilities, and the movie finds a way to have these characters counter each other's abilities and even combine each other's abilities, and that element made for some of the most exciting parts of the whole sequence. I honestly get such joy out of seeing Spider-Man take on Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and then seeing him later riding War Machine using his webs, or Ant-Man riding Hawkeye's arrows and then going inside the Iron Man suit and sabotaging it. So many cool moments like that just brings a huge smile to my face. It's so epic. Also, speaking of Ant-Man, I will not lie, Spider-Man is a huge show stealer in the airport battle. I mean, he has some of the best action sequences in the entire sequence. He's really funny, and Tom Holland absolutely kills every minute with Spider-Man. But I have to be honest, it's actually Ant-Man that walks away as the biggest highlight of this entire sequence. His interactions with the other heroes are funny as hell. He has some of the best lines. His action sequences are really fun and creative, and Giant Man. Just Giant Man. When I first saw Ant-Man go giant, I nearly shat my pants. I had to try so hard not to scream, "Frack, yes!" Only I wouldn't have used frack. The effects in this movie are just so good, and even when they don't look that real, they're still amazing because of how imaginative they are. Let's talk about the ending. So Cap and Bucky go to Siberia to stop Zemo from unleashing the Winter Soldier 2.0s. Iron Man follows them, and they end up striking a truce while they go and fight Zemo together. However, upon finding Zemo, they realize that Zemo has already killed the Winter Soldier 2.0s and was leading them into a trap. The trap being security footage of Bucky when he was still under the control of Hydra, killing Tony Stark's parents, and to make matters worse, Tony finds out that Captain America knew this and didn't tell him. Tony completely loses it, and the final showdown commences. Captain America trying to stop Tony Stark from killing his best friend. This is a purely emotionally driven conflict, and that's incredible. This fight doesn't come from a misunderstanding that can be cleared up by one guy saying the name of the other guy's mom, or some guy holding up a sign that literally says "Salusha!" This conflict is stemmed from each character's genuine emotional reaction based off of their complete, understandable understanding of this situation. I mean, Tony just found out that Cap was hiding the fact that Bucky, his best friend, killed Tony's parents. That's pretty crazy. They're emotional. They're acting purely based off of their emotions. There's no third party to come in and calm them down. It's an extremely heavy character moment that feels like it's being built up. This is Tony's reactive mindset being taken to the extreme. He felt such an immense guilt for not making amends to his parents before they were killed, and now he finally has someone to blame other than himself. Years of guilt comes out in a blind rage. They throw blows at each other, and eventually Bucky loses his arm and is incapacitated. Despite Cap's best efforts, Iron Man gets the upper hand and Cap falls to his knees, and after pleading one last time, Iron Man knocks him down again. But Cap stands up again, and what we get is a direct parallel to Steve Rogers' fight with the bully outside of that theater in the first Avenger. In that movie, Steve was shot from the left in that sequence. He was even in the left-hand side of the frame as he says, "I can do this all day." Cap says the exact same thing to Iron Man in Civil War, and just like like in the first Avenger, Cap is shot from the left, whereas Iron Man is shot from the right. And guess who else is shot from the right? That's right, the bully from the first Avenger. So the fact that Cap repeats what he said to the bully to Tony, and the fact that Tony is shot from the right and Cap is shot from the left, symbolizes that despite all of his desires and attempts to do the right thing, Iron Man has become a bully. Tony has the chance to finish Cap off. He's got him cornered. He could beat him right now. But Bucky grabs him by the leg, and Tony's last emotionally driven decision is to kick Bucky in the head, leaving him open so that Cap can grab him from behind. He pins him down and beats the shit out of him. Tony thinks Cap is gonna kill him, but Cap doesn't do that, proving that he is the better man. The way I interpreted this scene, and still interpret it now, is that Cap wins because he's fighting for what he believes is right, whereas Tony is fighting out of anger, guilt, frustration, jealousy, and revenge. Tony's actions in this movie come from emotional reactions. It's a cautionary tale that teaches you that decisions made in a negative headspace can be dangerous. If you're making a decision out of pain, fear, or guilt, it's gonna be painful, no matter how right your side may be, and that's why Iron Man loses. There are several points in the movie where Tony does realize he might be doing the wrong thing, like when he sees Team Cap imprisoned on the raft, or when he's beaten by Cap at the end. He's injured, covered in blood, and he has this look on his face like he's thinking, what just happened? While completely understandable, Tony's actions are wrong. It's a powerful message that challenges the audience by asking them why they believe what they believe. Does it come from some sort of pain you've suffered, or your own sense of right and wrong? It implies that the best way to live is to constantly reevaluate yourself and your beliefs, no matter how deeply held they are, in order to keep striving and growing to be a better person. And sometimes that's gonna mean letting go of something, whether it's vengeance, guilt, pain, or what you believe. As cheesy as this is gonna sound, the movie is basically asking you to be like Captain America. It's asking you to question your beliefs, the beliefs of others, your friends, and it's telling the audience that we need to stand up to bullies. I love this movie. It's a movie that juggles a huge collection of characters to deliver a piece of entertainment filled with Marvel's typical brand of great humor and spectacle, but it also takes the time to actually say something. I would even go as far as to call this movie a tragedy. The Avengers end up being broken apart, half of them end up in prison, and sure, they get broken out in the end, but they're still wanted criminals in the eyes of the world. One man's guilt leads to his downfall, and another is outcast and beaten for doing what he believes is right. Also, Vision ends up alone. I mean, the poor guy. It's fracking emotional! Captain America's Civil War is filled with amazing stunt work, choreography, fight scenes, chase scenes with fantastic special effects, both visually and creatively, but it also takes a shit ton of characters and brings them down to earth. It's a film about vengeance, guilt, selflessness, selfishness, and friendship, and when those things come together, there's gonna be problems. This is a chapter of the Infinity Saga that I love. There's nothing bad for me that I can really say about this movie. It's a movie that I will always think of in high regard and hold very dear to my heart. Captain America's Civil War gets a 10 out of frickin' 10! So those were my thoughts on Captain America's Civil War. I do hope you enjoyed this video, guys. Thank you so much as always for watching. Before I go though, I would just like to ask you guys, what did you think of Captain America's Civil War? Did you think it was good? Did you think it was bad? Did you think it was somewhere in the middle? Please leave your thoughts down in the comments below. And until next time, stay safe, stay awesome, live long and prosper, and may the Force be with you always.